Well, thank you. I'm going to speak on the behalf of the Resource Identification Committee, or RIC, and I will explain a little bit about the committee and where we're going. The committee's really just building ahead of steam, I think. We've had 2 or 3 meetings recently, and I'll give you an update on our current thinking. Really, as Amanas suggested, this is really about opportunities for new program development for peer, and extending the opportunities for research as well as the opportunities for funding of research. And that's really our focus. I've paraphrased here the charge to the RIC that Pierre originally provided, and I think it's accurate. And we're parsing things in our thoughts about opportunities and strategies both. And so in terms of opportunities, we'd like to identify potential funding opportunities, including judgments on the likelihood for success for peer leadership to consider. And I throw in the likelihood of success because as we rack and stack these things, I think that peer leadership would like to see a prioritized list emerge about things that are both compelling as well as possible. So we don't want to clutter that list with a lot of things that are unlikely. And so we're considering both those factors and boundary conditions as we move forward. And of course, the opportunities should really be aligned with peers' core interest in resilient design for extreme events in some way, shape, or form. So we're mindful of that as well. In terms of strategies, we'd like to provide recommendations of all strategies for increasing the chances for successful program development. You don't want to chase dollars, in my experience, and spend time on things that are unlikely to have a positive outcome. So again, just as important as identifying those opportunities is identifying whether you have a winning strategy to be successful as part of those. As I mentioned, we're just now really beginning to gain some steam. We've had 2 or 3 meetings and finalized the membership. I think the membership is really broad and brings perspectives from government, industry, as well as universities. And I think that's a very healthy thing. So I'm sure a number of you recognize these people and where they're coming from. And as always, with a committee that's this large, one of our biggest challenges is, the operations of the committee and trying to make sure everybody gets there and everybody participates and brings their ideas. And so we're still working to get on a good aggressive cadence for the operation and work of the committee. And we'd like to get something that at least approaches a monthly meeting so that we can build some momentum and actually get some stuff done. So that's the thought process. Important in my view, and I think in the committee's view, is to understand peers' recent and historical sponsor base, and particularly where they've got sustained funding from various agencies. And I would say it's just as important to understand where peer has been successful in program development, as well as where they've been challenged in program development, and sort of do a hard critique and assessment of why they were successful and perhaps in certain instances why things didn't work out as they hoped. But you can see the current programs that are ongoing here, the Transportation Research Program, TSRP, and the Peer Bridge Program that are both vital and healthy. And there's also a significant number of past and historical funding elements that Peer has gotten from some of the agencies and organizations you see here. And so they should certainly be within our scope to think about if there are opportunities within those that have funded Peer in the past. I wanted to make a point on the bottom of this slide. If you look at Peer's traditional funding base, it's really been very California-centric, and there's been not a lot of federal engagement. And so one of the things that we really want to look at carefully is what are the opportunities at the federal level with the Department of Energy, maybe again with the NRC and others. And so we're going to be, thinking very broadly about that potential sponsor base. And I think that's really important, given that we all know the national focus on infrastructure. And honestly, at the federal level, this is really a timely discussion. And they're putting significant funds, the federal government, into infrastructure. Where do the opportunities reside within those infrastructure bills? And that's something that we need to bring to the mix into the discussion as well. So I think, expanding the sponsor base is certainly a possibility, and deciding exactly how and where to go about doing that is really going to be the trick, I think. Moving forward, the committee is parsing their program development thoughts into 2 bins, and I think these are quite logical. Number one, can we identify potential large strategic opportunities in new areas? And these would be longer time horizon opportunities that may be high risk, but may be very long-term, high payoff for peer over the long haul. And so we're trying to think of those strategic opportunities that may arise. And I'll give you a couple of examples in a moment. And then secondly, can we identify potential tactical opportunities that are related to perhaps unsolved nagging problems that are recognized, but folks have really not come up with a adequate or good solution to. And these could be shorter term time horizon things that, maybe 2 or 3 years, but may be very compelling in terms of the contributions. So the committee is parsing their thoughts in these two directions. And I'll just give, to wrap up, a couple of quick examples. And these are not intended to be anything that the committee has decided is a priority or to push forward, but just representative examples of some of the things we're talking about already. And so, for example, the area of rapid on-demand awareness of infrastructure status and health. And this is really an area that is cross-cutting, cross-cuts buildings, water systems, energy systems, transportation systems. So there's broad opportunity there. And this potential derives from, the advances in sensor technologies and sensor modalities that are coming about these days. A lot of optical sensors, new types of optical sensors, they're being driven by advancements in other fields like self-driving vehicles, but there's some really interesting optical sensor technologies coming down the pipe. Communications are advancing tremendously and fast. 5G satellite direct uplink like Starlink, Internet of Things and cloud integration. So there's the ability to distribute data in a much more effective way. Advancing on data exploitation algorithms like artificial intelligence. So this just seems, for example, of a strategic area that peer ought to at least be evaluating and thinking about what their strategy is and can they be successful in this area. And number two, and we'll speak a little bit about this afternoon when we talk about the Pacific Rim Forum that peer just executed, is advanced simulations for regional scale earthquake risk. And this, in my mind, is really driven by the limitations of our ground motion database. And I'm sure you've all seen the classic picture of the peer database and the fact that within 10 to 20 kilometers of the fault, large fault, the data is very, very sparse. So as simulation capabilities advance, both in terms of the understanding of the phenomenological models, as well as the rapid advancements in high performance computing, this notion of being able to simulate things is pretty compelling. And so this could as well be a long-term objective of peer if they have the right strategy and the right thought process. So we'll speak to this a little bit more when we talk about the forum, but this would be an example of another potentially strategic area. One that might be considered a tactical area, and this is a favorite one of mine, because I've worked a lot in the DOE enterprise through the years, is understanding site response and the limitations or conservatisms of our traditional 1D site response models. And I really think, when I think of this problem, is the vertical ground motions and some of the exceptionally large vertical ground motions we're getting out of traditional hazard analyses. These have caused the US Department of Energy no end of problems in their major facilities. And so just for example, it's a tactical potential thrust, is what can we do to address these very, very large vertical ground motions we're seeing on all these facilities? When you apply them across the base of a major industrial type facility of the DOE, they just clobber you in terms of very, very large accelerations and damage to equipment and so forth. So this might be an example of a tactical thing where there may be interest in supporting something that would lead to a shorter term benefit of major impact. And so that would be an example of the tactical nature. So that is, in a nutshell, sort of the thought process and the steps that the RIC is working towards. We're working hard to get a little more aggressive over the next few months and get on our regular cadence. And we're not so self-absorbed to think that we might be the only ones with good ideas out there. So reach out to us if you have some particularly compelling ideas, and we'd be certainly receptive to hearing from you. And so Amarnath, I'll leave it there.